The big questions that I had going into today had to do with something called IMO, which is an isomaltooligosaccharide. So it's a type of prebiotic fiber that you'll find in protein bars that Chris had. So we'll talk about that. And then someone dropped a note for him asking about my thoughts on leaky gut, which I'm happy to share. Someone else asked about fasting in general, I think if it's healthy for you. And someone dropped me a note in my Q&A on, if there's too low of a calorie cut to go into. I'm assuming for weight loss. So I would even say in terms of these questions, as you have them, for sure, as much detail as possible, because so much of nutrition is contextual to what we're talking about specifically. But if we talk a little bit about this kind of fiber piece first, what's really interesting about it is, you will see this particular type of fiber, and I'll drop the name of it in our chat as well, so you can see the name. It's kind of, this isomaltooligosaccharide, or you'll see it as an IMO. What it is it's a type of non-digestible or prebiotic fiber that is therefore metabolized by your microbiota. So kind of the prebiotic aspect and promotion of this product just means that, although it is fiber, it's not actually digested by your intestines totally. What it does is it helps introduce good bacteria in your gut, which kind of leads us into this conversation of prebiotics and probiotics, right? Prebiotics feed the probiotics, which all helps to have a very healthy gut bacteria and it helps us digest and absorb food in the simplest of terms. So this particular food product is actually found, as a fun fact, naturally in certain foods. So it is naturally found in honey and fermentable foods like miso and soy sauce. But there is also a synthetic version, a man-made version that is commonly used in our food industry. So in particular, as mentioned, this came up in the context of protein bars. In doing a little bit of research on it, I actually found that Quest was part of a lawsuit in 2013 because of how they promoted it, which is pretty interesting. So in noting some of this, you will see it particularly in products that are touted as being like lower carbohydrate or lower sugar, because this particular IMO, if you will, which you'll find as a syrup or like a powder, is used to replace higher calorie sugars, things like honey or a syrup, and regulate sweetness without negatively changing the palatability, if you will, or like the taste of a product. So in terms of why we're talking about it and this idea of protein bars and how I would imagine it comes up in your context as trainers and coaches is, hey, Mel, is this a way that I can use, is this a particular product I could use to get in more fiber in my diet? How should I account for that? If we look at kind of a myth busting fact, I mean, honestly, I would say probably not. The best way to do this, and I think the more enjoyable way to get your pre and probiotics, is to actually eat a variety of fruits and vegetables and soluble and insoluble fibers, rather than just rely on this particular synthetic product. The reasons for that are because while there is some research, there isn't enough to kind of prove the prebiotic benefit that is being addressed here or asked for or promoted. The other interesting fact, and this is where that lawsuit particularly comes into play, is because it was promoted as a prebiotic fiber type supplement as part of a Quest bar, it was assumed that the fiber itself, or the IMO, this particular fiber, was coming from one specific plant. But in fact, it wasn't. It was coming from all different sources. And because of that, it wasn't only one type of sugar, it was a couple different types of sugar, which means that while IMO is promoted as being a prebiotic fiber, and there are components of it that are technically undigested, which is why the discussion of like being lower carb, because if you talk about net carbs and if some of that is undigested, you can account for that. Is why it was discussed. It is problematic because if it's coming from different sources of sugar, it means that there's different absorption rates of this particular type of fiber. So when this lawsuit went into play and more research was done into those particular products, it was found that some of this sugar is being digested and absorbed. So particularly there's like a set range of calories that is coming from this product. And so the reason I say it's not worth leaning into this particular synthetic fiber as a way to get your fiber intake or your prebiotics is because some of it's still going to be absorbed. And so if you're someone who's tracking your calories and your macros, you're actually not going to have a clear example of what that is. So I'm wondering if any of you have any kind of thoughts or questions on it. I know that was a little bit heavy, but an interesting find in terms of addressing that particular type of fiber found in protein bars.
So you addressed the fiber aspect, right? And the probiotic aspect. You haven't addressed the protein aspect yet?
Well, the protein aspect of what? I mean, the question was about the fiber in the protein bar. So if you have a question about the protein, I'm happy to answer.
Yeah. So I think I asked this last week. Is there a difference between like like I know there's different types of proteins, right? There's like a complete protein and like the isolate, and whey and all that stuff. Does that have the same thermogenic effect as like eating meat, or that protein that you get from there? Like, is there pros and cons of like eating maybe a protein bar or a protein shake over like like a piece of beef or chicken or something like that?
I mean, if we're talking about the thermogenic effect of food and we're talking about digestion and absorption in general, the things that are going to affect digestion and absorption include fat and fiber as part of your meal, as part of a product, right? So if you think about a ribeye, for example, it's a fattier piece of meat. You're going to digest that a little bit slower than if you have a piece of sirloin, or of course, like whey protein isolate, which is just straight up protein. It's ready for your body to digest almost immediately without kind of the interference of other nutrients to be digested and absorbed. So if that answers your question, like, yes, these products would be different than I think a whole food source that